Hey, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon for those of you on the East Coast. Good morning to those of you on the West Coast. I'm excited to get started with another week here, August 15th. We're going to go into a live training. We got a lot of good training, so I hope you check out my activity where you can see in there the live training we got for this week. I wanted to give those of you who show up earlier on time a tip, kind of a little bonus tip. As it relates to when you're putting content out on LinkedIn, in particular, I'm talking to those of you who might put content out and you're trying to hit the federal buyer or teammates. Occasionally go through your LinkedIn connections and unfollow or disconnect, like unconnect with people on LinkedIn. Unfollow means you won't see their stuff, but I don't mean just that. You don't even want LinkedIn pushing your stuff out to a connection that has nothing to do with your industry, right? And so I'll give you an example. I've got almost 18,000 connections, and I really think I could probably get rid of 3,000 or 4,000. And that's my goal, is to actually go down, not up in connections. And I've been doing that. I've been getting rid of connections usually when I see them in my LinkedIn feed. And it's no bad thing. I just look at them and I go, well, we're not in that same space. I've been on LinkedIn for I don't know, 20 years or almost 20 years. And I think since 2007. And so I've been using it a long time. Well, in the beginning, when I was using LinkedIn, I was connected to a lot more people who were in the SharePoint space. I'm not in SharePoint anymore. I'm not a developer or engineer type person, right? So there's a lot of connections that I'm connected with that I really don't need to be connected to. And the reason this is bad for me as a person who creates content, and why I'm telling you this tip, is if I create content that I'm trying to get out to federal buyers or people in that space, LinkedIn doesn't know who it's sending it to. So if it sends it out to a bunch of people and all these SharePoint people don't engage my content because they're going, I don't know what Neil's sending. I don't do anything with federal sales. LinkedIn goes, oh, your content is maybe not that attractive to the audience. Well, that's because I got the wrong people looking at it. I need LinkedIn to send it to more small businesses, more federal buyers. And those people will engage it because I'm sending an org chart or a strategic plan. And so it's something for you to consider. It's a tip for you to consider about being okay with unconnecting or disconnecting with people, not just unfollowing, but totally just remove the connection. So that way LinkedIn's not sending folks out. Okay. Let me just make sure I have my ducks in a row. I'm turning off my little chat thing here. My audio and visual is good. I'm good to go. For those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Neil McDonald. I'm the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce, and I had a great weekend, and so my voice is kind of gone. But my energy and my knowledge are right here, but my voice is somewhere else. So welcome to my daily federal sales training, where I teach processes and procedures for you to achieve success in the federal space. I spent 20 years in the federal market as a small business owner. And since 2018, I've been teaching people just like you that government contracting is not a secret. It's just a process. A process is A to Z and all the steps in between. When we follow the process, we'll get the success, the outcome that we expect. Today, we're going to talk about how to move beyond initial success that you had gotten in the federal market. That might mean that you've gotten an initial 500,000 and $1 million, but you can't really pop. Or maybe you're sitting at $5 and $10 million and you've gotten that far on an annual revenue stream, but you really can't pop beyond. Well, I'm going to talk to that. I'm going to talk why and some steps, recommendations for you to follow. Before we get started, though, do me a favor, help buyers and me remember who you are, know who you are. In the chat, put your core competencies, 2 or 3 words, along with your company name. If you're able to, use the @ symbol and your company name. For example, @Bain Group. If you put that in, it should hyperlink to it so that more of us later on can click on it and follow through to your company page, maybe follow you on your company page and engage you further. We have a fantastic community of people here, starting with you and then the rest of the people that you see in chat. This is a great community, and I've been watching people connect independent of me, right? I create a platform where you can come meet new people, but you're connecting, and I like that. I want you to remember, I want people to remember who you are and what your company does. And so if you do cyber or data, get it in there and help us remember who you are. Today, I'm going to share a couple of images throughout my training today. And so I just want to get started with a bell curve, and let me show this to you. Let me show you this graph, and I want you to keep this in mind as we go forward. Let me get rid of my face. So here, I call this the adoption bell curve, and I use it for many different examples. But let me just walk you through what a bell curve is and why it is so vital for you to pay attention to it. And this is important whether you're doing cold calls. This is showing you some people will, some people won't answer your calls. But it's also important for your successes, and why you've had successes, what I'm going to talk about today. So on the left-hand side, you can see that 2.5% of the entire audience that you might reach, the entire customer base, et cetera, will be your customers. These are called innovators. These are the people who were just waiting, as it relates to today's training, they were just waiting for you to get in business. And they were like, I'm buying from you, right? And then the next group you have are called early adopters. 13.5% of the market are early adopters. These are people who have heard of you, they respect you. They weren't raving fans, but as soon as you get in business and you come talk to them, right? Innovators, you don't even have to talk to. They're like, oh my God, I've been waiting for you to sell something so I can buy it. Early adopters are the people who say, well, come in and talk to me. I like you. I know, I trust you. So let's talk. What do you sell? Let's hear about it. Let me see if it fits. And then they'll make a decision. And the part I really want to focus on today is going to be between the early adopters and the early majority. So the early majority makes up this big chunk of the first half of your market. 34% of the people, these are the people basically who will buy from you when you have proven past performance, your procurement ready. There's these checkbox items that they will follow, and we can talk about that either later now or in a different training. And then late majority and laggards are on the right-hand side. Ignore them. Those aren't who we're trying to talk to. Today, we're talking about how do you get to the early majority, the people who probably would buy from you, but you're just not able to get over that initial success you had with innovators and early adopters. By the way, late majority, those are people who would prefer to buy from your competitors. And when you're ready, you'll be able to beat your competitors out of the out of those opportunities, right? And so, and laggards will never buy from you. If you haven't figured that out, laggards, those people at the other end, those are the people who never will buy from you, never will agree with you. No big deal, right? Some will, some won't. So what? So in between early adopters, the 13.5% of the market, and the 34% that make up the early majority is this gap. And in technology, and I actually learned this a long time ago. I mean, more than 10 years ago, in a book called, might have been more than 20 years ago, in a book called Crossing the Chasm. And this was the technology adoption bell curve, is where I first learned it, in this gap. So let's say the iPhone or the fax or whatever technology you can think of was coming out, the laptops even, these things were coming out, and a lot of them would be able to sell early on in the innovator and the early majority, right? Those first 2.5% and 13.5% of the market. But what they struggled with and what they had to put in place was a plan to get across the chasm between the early adopters and early majority. And until you cross that chasm, you're going to be stuck at that initial success. But when you can learn to cross that chasm, you will get beyond this initial success. And that's kind of the whole point of today's topic, right? It's why I use that image. It's not often that I get an image that fits perfectly to what I'm trying to teach. That chasm, that person is jumping over the chasm, this great big valley, but it's doable, right? They did it, and they jumped over the chasm. And when you jump over the chasm, and today I'm going to give you tips on how to do that. When you cross the chasm, you will begin to have a lot more success. Up until this point, you had 16% of the market, or 16% of the success you should be able to get, right? It's a different way of looking at it. When you cross the chasm, you'll get an additional 34% of the market, or more importantly, you'll get an additional 34% of your potential success out there, certainly double what you've achieved so far. And this is a big deal. So you just need to find out what are the tips that are there. Before I give you the tips on that, though, I want to talk to you about why you're at this state that maybe you're stuck at the initial success level. If it makes sense what I'm saying about the bell curve and those groups, innovators, early adopters, et cetera, and the crossing the chasm, if that makes sense, do me a favor, in the chat, just put bell curve. You understand the bell curve, and you get what I'm saying. So let's talk about why you're stuck at these initial levels before I go on to how do you get past the initial levels. So one of the things to keep in mind, and I like to be sometimes we call it brutally honest in my friend group. Um, I like to be really direct, right? If you like what I'm saying, keep it. If you don't like it, tamper it to what fits you. But basically, in order for us to have any kind of progress, we have to face reality. We have to admit to ourselves where we're at. We can't look at ourselves through the eyes of where we wish we were at, or we can't see ourselves with the skill and the focus that we wish we had. We need to sit there and acknowledge where we're at. And the reason is if we don't acknowledge where we're at, we'll never get to where we want to be. For example, there's a city called Pasadena, California, right? And I think Disneyland's in there. And if you want to go to Disneyland, you got to drive over to Pasadena, California. But the problem is, if you are actually in Pasadena, Maryland, which is out in Annapolis, if you know the Maryland geography, then you're all the way on the opposite side of the country, away from where you thought you were going to be, and you were thinking you were really close to your goals because you're in Pasadena. You're in Pasadena and you're looking for Disneyland, right? But you actually are in Pasadena, Maryland. I'm just asking you to keep in mind, admit with where you're at, admit to what's been done so far, and to go with that, think about the successes you have. Today's topic is about getting past the initial success you had. Can you look at your initial success and reverse engineer it? Reverse engineering means walking back from where you're at to what led to where you're at. If you think about a television, reverse engineering means breaking it back up all the way to the component parts to see how it was built. Well, your success, you can break it up to the component parts of your success. What are the steps that led to it? And this is really important, right? I can, in my past companies, both of them, both of the ones that were federal government contracting companies, I can look in and reverse engineer or walk back every single contract win I got to the first person I met that led me in that direction. I'll give you a quick example. The very first government contract I got in my last company that I had was with the VA, and it was a SharePoint contract. And the very first person I got it from was some high school buddy of somebody else. And they connected. They happened to run into each other. Sure, let's connect. Tell me what you guys do. And if there's anything I can do to help, I will. So we met this guy who wasn't even in government contracting, but he was nice. And he introduced us to Ted and said, oh, Ted's a friend of mine. I know he's in government contracting. And Ted was doing $5-10 million. Maybe he'll talk to you guys. And so we went and talked with Ted. And we were able to go in and say, we're a SharePoint company, right? I mean, it was much more beautiful how we said it. But basically, we said we're a SharePoint company. We talked about it. And Ted said, well, shoot, I work with the VA. I'm getting asked all the time from them about SharePoint. But we don't do that. We do these other things. And maybe I can introduce you to the customer, and you guys could just sub under us if we can win that. And long story short, Ted went off, and they won a contract that we were subcontract under. And because of how strong Ted was, he just let us have most of the work, which was totally fine. It was acceptable to the customer. But he let us take on most of the work, like 80% of the work, which was perfect for us as we were getting ourselves started. Well, I could do that same reverse engineering for every single opportunity contract that we won. Could you do the same with your current successes? Whatever you have done successfully, can you walk it back? And the thing to keep in mind is sometimes we're at these initial levels, not because we had a process, which is exactly what I'm going to tell you need to have. But sometimes we have it either the initial successes because we were winging it. And again, just, not pointing at you, just talking generally with any of us. Sometimes we wing it. We're responding to random things and one thing hits. There's a difference between dropping your fishing pole line into the water over and over again and sometimes a fish bites compared to a fisherman who knows exactly where to go, which hole to fish in the river, and when during the day to go there that the fish are biting the most, right? That's where I want you to be, is a person who knows where the hole is the fish are in and what's the best time of day compared to maybe winging it, right? Another way that maybe you got yourself the initial success, and I've seen this and I've been there myself as well, is that perhaps you got lucky, right? You could have got lucky maybe as an 8A firm where you came out and Your business opportunity specialist is helping you just get into a couple of different contracts. Next thing you know, you got several different contracts. Often what happens is several different agencies, several different contracts. So maybe you got lucky that way. Maybe, and I don't mean to diminish the effort it took to get that, but what I mean is it's not repeatable. So another example of getting lucky is, say you come out of a large company like Lockheed, or you come out of the Navy and you have existing relationships and you go right back in. Well, those existing relationships run out at some point. So maybe you were able to come out, get a subcontract, get a contract, and even getting up to, like I said, 5 or 10 million. But if this was just coming from the existing relationships you had, but you have no process for creating new relationships, then how do you repeat that success? You have proven that you have the ability to win when you have relationships that you can get in and talk about the need and the opportunity. But if you don't have enough relationships, how can you move forward? And so those are some of the process steps I want to talk about as we move forward. Okay, so let's talk about how to get unstuck as we come down to the bottom part of this. Getting unstuck, really the answer is following a process. And so I'm going to go into this and talk about that. Remember the bell curve, right? And I was talking about the bell curve and how do you cross the chasm. Well, one of the things to keep in mind for success, successfully growing beyond where you're at, is to have one goal, one plan, and one team. You know, I got a friend, Tim, he might even be on here, Tim Kelly. He heard this from somewhere else, read it somewhere, but I'm just going to give Tim credit for this idea of you need to have one goal, one plan, one team. One team executing one plan to achieve one goal, right? And we'll talk about this. The goal is the amount of money. Say you want $1 million next year or $5 million next year in new sales, right? That's your goal. Well, what's your plan? Your plan basically comes down to, or your strategy is, one agency, right? A department like the Navy is sufficient. One agency and a core competency, this product. So this agency, this product will lead me to this goal. When you have that kind of focus, you can then share it with your team. Again, when you try to cross the chasm and go to that early majority, that place you want to go to get more business, if you have 5 or 10 people on your team and you're all standing at the edge of the chasm, and leadership basically says, okay, everybody get across the chasm. Whoever gets there first, let us all know, and we'll all try to follow you. Well, that's not a good strategy. That's not one plan and one team. That's 10 teams trying to go after one goal. And maybe now, if you have 10 teams, they're tweaking the goal. And so what you want is to communicate with everybody on your team, everybody on the sales side, BD, capture and proposal, everybody on the marketing side or the finance side, anybody who's contributing to the efforts to bring in new sales should be focused on, this is our goal. We want to get $5 million new revenue, new sales next year. We're going to do it by going after the Navy and going after SharePoint services, et cetera. And then all of us are going to work as a team to go after that. When you have that one focus, that one thing focus with everybody, you'll be able to move in the right direction. So let me show you a graph. And some of you should be familiar with this graphic. Where is it? There it is. So this process, there's a lot of process out there that's complex, but making money in the federal government doesn't have to be complex, right? I said it's not a secret, but I also, and it's just a process, but it's not a complex process. Everything is a pretty straightforward process if you just move forward. So if you look at relationships, we just said a minute ago that because you're already making money, you already have initial success. That means you already know how to sell. If you look at the circle on the right, you already know how to turn relationships into opportunities, into proposals that win sales, win revenue, right? And when you do that over and over again, you can keep it going. The problem we have at the moment, and the reason we're stuck, is because we're not building new relationships. This is my number one reason why people get stuck at initial success, is because they don't know how to repeat what they got lucky. And when I say lucky, I just mean you had relationships at the Navy or at the Army or at the Lockheed Martin that you were able to capitalize on. That's not a bad thing. Luck is a good thing in that sense. It gets you started, but you don't have any way to repeat that initial success. But that initial success came because you had relationships. And so what you need to do is, when you think about one plan, that's visibility. What are we selling and who are we selling it to is the targeting, right? One plan, in there allows us to focus on what do we sell and who do we sell it to. And when you do those things, they lead right to outreach, your ability to call these people that you've just identified. When you think about the 7-step process, you can see it for two reasons or two paths. One is business development. If you're trying to get into a new agency and pop, if you're trying to get into a new market area, so let's say, for example, data across multiple agencies, you can use the same kind of a plan where you focus on VTO, that visibility, targeting, and outreach, and then you pursue that until it delivers the relationships, which allow you to start going down a normal capture process. The second way you can use this is for capture. Sometimes we struggle in capture going beyond what we see in SAM or the forecast or GovWin. Those are all just data sources, but those aren't capture. How do you get in and talk with the program managers to move yourself beyond any initial success and start winning up more opportunities? You follow VTO, visibility, targeting, outreach. When you follow these different process steps, you're going to achieve the success because people will be able to see you. Your team will be focused on what you sell. We sell this product to this customer. I was talking with somebody today about beachheads, and I don't know how much you know about World War II. And not to bring this totally into a war example, but I love the example of beachheads because we go into Normandy, we hit a beach, and you're just trying to take over one country, and then you'll get all of Europe, right? I mean, that's kind of the idea. What we sometimes make the mistake of is trying to look at all of Europe and go, how can we sit there and go after all of Europe? How can we win all of these agencies and all of these opportunities? What I want you to do is to think about your growth to the next level beyond your initial success as going into Europe on a beach. You establish a beachhead with your core competency, the thing you are the best at, the thing you have past performance at, right? When you establish that beachhead, you then move inland into France, into the country, right? And you're able to spread further. If you have a secondary core competency, you can say, hey, now that you're giving me money for data, you can also give me money for cyber, right? And then you can move beyond France into the rest of Europe, into the countries throughout Europe. This is just a beachhead approach, but it begins with VTO, visibility, targeting, and then outreach. When you do that, your success in the ring, where it's relationships lead to opportunities, lead to proposals, lead to sales, that will begin to be on an automatic pilot. Of course, you're going to have to do the work that's in there. I'm not saying you're just going to get money for nothing, but that stuff should be pretty easy for you because you've already proven when I have the right relationships, we can win. Our initial success came from our initial relationships. Now we need to figure out how do we go beyond that. I deal with this with customers almost every single day, and I love how it can come back to something as straightforward as VTO. By the way, if you want that 7-step process, I have it as a handout. Happy to share it with you. So just put in the chat 7 steps handout, please, and I will definitely get that to you. Hopefully this is making sense to you. As I move forward and I think about initial success for a lot of companies, one of the biggest challenges that people have when they're successful in one area is they feel completely confused about going somewhere else. And I wanted to give you one last tip that can help you think of a way to be able to achieve success. When you started your company, and if you're an employee in a company, when you joined this company and they were getting started, they were thinking as a small business, we need to be aggressive. We need to learn all the steps. We need to go talk to the small business specialists, et cetera. At some points, we tend to grow out of that small level. Oh, we're too mature. We're more like Lockheed than we are like that brand new company. And what I would like to recommend to you is that you should consider behaving like a startup. It's what we teach large businesses on how they can compete against smalls. Large companies, if you haven't heard this analogy, they can't turn on a dime. Small businesses can, but large businesses are like a big cargo ship, and it takes them hundreds of miles and hours to turn. But a small business can almost turn 180 degrees instantly, right? And so we teach larges, how do you be more nimble like that? Well, you need to create a group of people who can act entrepreneurial. Let them operate like a startup, but within Lockheed. Well, I want you to do the same thing, even though you're not billions, maybe you're only millions. Think again, what it was like to be a small business and a brand new startup. You were willing to listen to anybody. So go back to the PTACs and say, hey, we've been in HHS, but I'm really trying to get in DOD and I'm not getting any success. See what they have to say. Use these mentors. I call them the 7 mentors, and you can find them in our directory. But the 7 mentors, the PTACs, the VBOCs, the Women Business Centers, the Business Opportunity Specialists, the PCRs, the Small Business Specialists, and somebody else. I can't remember who I missed. So I can't remember who to say. But these 7 people, if you go back to them and behave a little bit like an entrepreneurial startup, a new startup trying to go after something, then you will get rid of that baggage of I know everything or I know what to do, and you'll just remind yourself. And the cool thing is you will move at 10 times the speed of the brand new startup, right? Because when people like me or the PTAC or anybody else give you some advice, you're going to go, oh, that totally makes sense. Let me do that. Those business or small business professionals getting in and actually having an intro call with them about what do I need to do to succeed? Not just to win an opportunity, but what do I need to do to succeed in a meeting where you in the Navy would actually care what I have to say, even though I worked at HHS before, something like that, right? So my tip for you there is just behave like you're a small business. I hope this training made sense. I know it made sense. I hope you found value in it. We talked about how to move beyond your initial success, and you can definitely do this if your entire company aligns to the 7-step process that I talked about to achieve one clear goal in your company. If you found the training valuable, please spread the word. Thanks for joining me today. Remember, government contracting is not a secret. It's just a process. I'll see you in the next training.